Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Brave Briefings, a place where brave men and women come together and either share their tips or their stories on how we can create a world that is devoid of sexual and gender based violence, where we can stop toxic behaviors, both masculine and female toxic behaviors, and where we can live a peaceful, safe life. Are you brave? Are you brave, Stu?
Yes, I am brave.
Well, I'd like to welcome Stu today. Uh, please tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Stu Chase, and I'm from the United States. I am a marriage and family therapist, a life coach, and also a school counselor for elementary public schools.
Fantastic. And that's where we need to start with this brave movement, get it into those elementary schools and teach our kids what brave is about. And to remind the audience, brave, B is boundaries, R is respect, A is agreement, V is values and vulnerability, and E is equality, empathy, and empowerment. And today I think Stu is going to talk about
Vulnerability.
vulnerability. Great.
Yeah,
So, how
typically,
can we be vulnerable and be brave at the same time?
right. First of all, I love that you highlighted elementary in school because that's where we need to address at first. You know, with kids, they're the most impressionable developmentally. And if we can't make a difference at that age, it's much harder to transform adults. You know, there's a saying in America, you can't teach old dog new tricks. And while certainly I believe it's never too late to change, and if you want to change, you can certainly change. But for children, they're just so much more malleable and open. And I've just been blown away, especially during COVID, supporting all of the classrooms and just normalizing the kind of insecurities and fears that boys are enculturated and grow up with. And when one boy speaks, it's like popcorn. One voice speaks, then another voice speaks, and all of a sudden, the girls chime in as well, and they're validating and praising the courage of the boys being able to share things that they think about but don't normally say. And so that's really where I see the biggest impact is if we can get in at the early ages.
Gosh, that is so true. It is so important that we start early and get those youngsters. So how do we teach them though to be vulnerable? You're saying it's happening naturally, but is there anything more we should be doing to help them open up and to speak up?
Well, one of the things that I do, I'm glad you asked that question, is I talk to families a lot. So I do a lot of family work, and I create a family culture, a family system where talking about feelings is the norm. And so it's as normal as brushing teeth or taking your pills or saying grace before eating dinner. You also talk about how you feel. And I have this great chart where it's just the basic core feelings and everyone goes around in the family and they share how they're feeling and why. And then they take those feeling vocabulary words that they're slowly building over time, and then you pair that with the schools. And then if you empower teachers, which is also what I do, I support teachers on creating classroom environments where, again, it's all about normalizing that, but feelings are validated, they're welcomed, there's no stigma against talking about how you feel. And for boys and of course men later in life, there's just such resistance and fear around opening up and sharing what you're really feeling. And in my personal view and experience in this profession, you know, men, and it starts again at young ages for boys, we're just so repressed. You know, I certainly didn't have a family growing up that encouraged and supported talking about your feelings. And if anything, it was the opposite. I saw my dad cry one time, and you know, when I cried, I would go hide into a separate room. And so, if there's a safe place, an outlet, and a healthy supportive environment to get out your feelings. So much of this repressed, passive aggressive um, behavior that we're seeing out in the world that is responsible for so much horrific violence, it could really, really be reduced drastically. And that's actually what the research is showing is the earlier we can address these things with young people, the better off our future will be.
That is so true. And it's so important, not only for boys, but for girls as well. I mean, I grew up in an era where children were seen and not heard, and we were never allowed to express anything, let alone our feelings. And
Right.
and I'm sure that is a lot of the reason why we have so much dysfunction in our society today. So yes, it's definitely the right way to go to start getting people to express their feelings. But what happens now they express their feelings? How do the parents and the teachers cope with those expressions of feelings, especially if they're a negative emotion that they're expressing?
I'm a little confused by the question. So are you saying that if if parents are struggling to talk about feelings and meet their children where they are?
Yes, basically. So a child comes and says, "Oh, I'm filled with hatred for that other little boy." How does the parent deal with that?
Well, that's where people like me come in because I'm supporting the family, the elders, the people whose generation this wasn't as you said welcomed and I help teach them um, through modeling. So that's the key: is qualified professionals modeling what talking about feelings, especially with hatred or anger. Those are negative range emotions, and the more that we can model and show how those feelings are allowed to be expressed, and this is why it's vulnerability, because when we're vulnerable and we show others how it's done, suddenly it's like a light switch gets turned on. And for the receiver, they're like, wait a second, if he's doing it, maybe I could practice it too. But until they see somebody else do it, this is how vulnerability works. Everyone waits for someone else to go first. So,
It's
yeah.
a bit like the bystander syndrome, where I'm not going to help that person because nobody else is helping that person.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
but what
Exactly.
happens now in the playground where one boy has been vulnerable and he says what he's feeling, and it's quite emotional, it's quite sensitive. Maybe he cries, or maybe he's very expressive, and the other boys turn around and say, "Oh, stop being a sissy." How do we deal with that situation?
Well, in that situation, I would bring those two boys into a group therapy session, and I would teach them effective communication, and especially with role play, mock therapy is what we call it. I get the other boy who is demeaning the boy who is vulnerable, and I switch the tables. So it's like when the tables are turned, how would you feel if someone talked to you this way? And the key is you find what's vulnerable for them so that they can relate to the boy who is vulnerable. And that's really the key, is when you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and make it relatable, that's the whole difference.
And I love what you said, communication, clear, honest, open communication actually fixes everything.
Mhm.
if we
What
can
a thought.
if we can talk about those situations. But yes, role playing is a very positive tool and technique to use in any area of your life to actually experience things firsthand. So that's a lovely approach. So
Right?
do you have any other tips we can give our audience on how you can be vulnerable, or just generally what you can do to be brave to stop this violence?
Well, just like when you exercise a muscle, it takes time. So be kind and patient with yourself. And also, you're the average of the people you hang out with, you spend time with on a regular basis. So if you want to change a fundamental behavior pattern in yourself, you got to find like minded people. And if you're not used to being vulnerable and again, societies at large throughout the world, that's not usually encouraged. Secrecy, silence, and shame is kind of what runs rampant. And there's a phrase that I picked up on many years ago, which I think is more severe than the pandemic we're facing, which is fake happy with no sad. The fake smile. Everything's great. How you doing? Fine. Are you? I'm doing fine. Oh, yeah, how you doing? You're fine. Everyone's fine. But in reality, we have addiction, we have violence, we have sex and drugs, all kinds of problems that society faces. And that's outlets. It's like if you can't speak to your vulnerability, it's going to come out sideways and it affects you psychosomatically.
So what happens if you're working in a toxic environment? You can't get out of it. It's your job. You're not in a position to leave your job, and the situation is filled with this toxic behavior. How do you deal with that? Where you can't express, and there is no Stu there to help you cope. How do people in that situation manage?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're speaking to the socioeconomic. Some people are more privileged than others depending on where you live and what kind of educational access you have. And so in those situations, we have YouTube and we have the internet, and we do our best to reach audiences like that. But again, you can lead a horse to water. You can't force them to drink. And so, if someone is desperate enough, they will find a way. That's been my experience. And certainly during COVID, clients find their way to me online, and I'm able to reach a bigger audience than I ever did before. And so what I would recommend for people like that is to start with the internet, the computer, and then we can always find a car or somewhere that's outside of the familiar environment that's less hostile. And the key is when you feel safe enough to open up, it's very natural for all people. We want to be vulnerable. It's a craving of our soul's desire, and that's universal for humans. But like I said, you can't give what you never got. So until you find someone else to give you a new frame of reference, you're going to keep perpetuating the same kind of behaviors because you don't know any better. And that's okay. I mean, we learn what we learn when we're ready to learn it.
And that's so important that we actually develop role models, that the fathers, the parents, the teachers, and the leaders, leaders in business need to also be brave and to be able to role model what it's like to be brave. So we actually should be starting with all the teachers and the leaders and the parents as well. So it's a
Well,
two-prong
right.
approach. Start with the kids, start with those little ones, start with the leaders and bring them together in the middle.
Well, there is another phenomena which I've been observing where when you start with kids, earlier you were asking how do we motivate people who are older, who are more set in their ways, who might be uncomfortable with vulnerability. Oftentimes, you just have to find the right motivation. And certainly for parents, if a kid comes to them with something vulnerable and they're emotional about it, oftentimes I find that parents in certain moments are more open or receptive than other moments. And it's those key moments that make the difference. Because if you can get in there once, you can get back to it. There's another saying I love, which is once you've been to the top of the mountain, there's lots of trails back to the top.
I like that. Being a hiker myself, and there's lots of trails.
Right.
That's fabulous. Wow, Stu, that's really some really great insights there. And let's call all the teachers, all the parents out there. Come on, let's get our kids to be vulnerable. It's so important to let them express those feelings and just be natural, be real.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the key as well for the naysayers and those who have lost hope is have faith in just one person. And then once you transform one, have faith in just another person. And slowly over time, that will create a ripple effect. At least that's what I believe.
Absolutely. And by being brave, we're going to get everybody to be brave and we're going to have a great society.
Exactly.
So
It's been
thank
a
you,
pleasure.
everyone. Sorry.
I said it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me talk to your audience.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'll put Stu's contact details below. Please contact him, reach out, whether you're in trouble and you need someone to talk to, or whether you need some guidance on how to talk to your children. Do reach out to Stu. And guys, come on, you can all be brave, you can be bold, and most importantly, we can all fly free. Thank you, Stu, and thank you everybody for watching. Do join us again for another edition of Brave Briefings. Bye.
Bye.